Hello again, and welcome to the Squared Circle News Network. Today is June 5th. This is episode 11, and as always, I'm your host, Aaron Patrick. And as always, I want to thank you so much for joining me here today. And as long as you're here, you know the drill already. Please click that subscribe button. Click the thumbs up for the like. And don't forget to hit the little bell for notifications so that you are made aware every time I upload new content. Appreciate you guys so much for watching and joining me here. It means a lot to me. It's been an absolute huge week in professional wrestling. And a lot to go over here. I want to try and not keep this video too long. I want to keep it around the same runtime as I usually go to. But if necessary, we'll go a little bit longer. I promise the content's important, and you're going to want to stay tuned and be up to date on everything that's going on. Of course, we've got to start with the WWE and their releases again this past week. Big names, real big names released in the WWE, and from what I understand, there's more to come. So this week, the WWE, as you already probably know, you follow this stuff and you've probably seen the podcast, but I like to digest and absorb it a little while before I jump on here and make comments and talk about it. But so far this week, the WWE has released Braun Strowman, Aleister Black, Lana, Ruby Riott, Buddy Murphy, and Santana Garrett. Big name here, obviously, is Braun Strowman. And I'm going to go over these kind of briefly one at a time and just let you know what I think. Braun Strowman, a couple of years ago, made a huge splash in the WWE. He was brought out and introduced as just this huge monster, and rightfully so. He's got the strength, he's got the look, he's got all the tools in that capacity to draw attention and make that instant impact in professional wrestling. The big mistake that the WWE made with Braun Strowman is, and this is kind of something that Vince McMahon does now, not so sure about the past. I don't really recall in earlier years, and I'm talking pre-Attitude Era, things like that. Vince didn't make these kind of mistakes. Vince used his whole roster and really to an optimum level. Nothing like what goes on today. But kind of the thing that Vince does, when he sees a guy like Braun Strowman, Vince loves these huge muscle-bound guys. This is his thing. And I don't think Vince takes the time to evaluate and cultivate the talent of a professional wrestler when he sees somebody this size. The smartest move they could have made with Braun Strowman would be put him in Ohio Valley Wrestling, put him in their training academy, and let this guy really learn how to wrestle, how to use his size, how to use his strength, how to learn ring psychology, all the important things to make anybody a successful professional wrestler. You can have a great look, you can have unbelievable strength, you can do moonsaults and sunset flips and shooting star presses and things like that. But if you don't know how to put these things together and put together a complete package and tell a story and use the ring psychology, you're going nowhere. And I honestly believe this is the mistake that WWE made with Braun Strowman. You know, they brought him in, they had him in backstage segments where he was flipping vehicles, ambulances, trucks, and things like that. And that's all great. I mean, you of course you're gonna perk up and take interest and notice this kind of thing. But what good is all that if when you get in the ring and you start wrestling a program with someone and you clearly look out of place? Braun Strowman is a guy that's huge, muscle bound, strong as all hell, and extremely athletic. And I'm not saying athletic to the point where he's going to be a high flyer, but athletic to the point where he's quick, he's fast, he can maneuver, he's got this big size, but it doesn't hinder him from moving fluidly in the ring. All these things, this guy should have been in training. He should have been learning. He should have been working with some of the better big men in the history in the WWE, inside their clique, inside their cache of wrestlers that could have taught him everything he needs to know to use his tools in the right way. And I don't think that ever happened. It clearly didn't happen because this showed over time. It got old, and it got old to the point where you had this huge man that you brought out as this unstoppable beast, and you made him human, and you made him very beatable, and he lost a lot of key matches. And the WWE really, it's the WWE that destroyed Braun Strowman. Braun Strowman didn't destroy himself. He didn't ruin his own WWE career. He was brought down by what happened inside the WWE and the improper training and not the right cultivation. So as far as Braun Strowman's future, ideally for me, what I would love to see is I'd love to see Braun Strowman go to New Japan Pro Wrestling. I think inside their training system, he would learn a lot. And the Japanese wrestling fans and the Japanese wrestling culture, they love the Western Caucasian big men like this. They become huge fans. Um, Lance Archer. I want to use Lance Archer as an example because Lance Archer is AEW's version of what Braun Strowman should have been in the WWE. Lance Archer was just a huge, huge star in New Japan, and Braun Strowman could be the same thing. Lance Archer, and I'm not saying within the system of the wrestling as far as New Japan Pro Wrestling, it's not like he held the world championship or anything like that, but the fans were just drawn to Lance Archer. And I think Braun Strowman could have the same sort of fan attention, the same sort of popularity in New Japan Pro Wrestling. And I think he could really learn to use his tools and cultivate his skills to the point where he could be. I apologize. I didn't look up his age and things like that, but I assume he's still a fairly young guy. I think he could learn a lot to the point where he could have an amazing career in New Japan, or he could learn and he could come back to the United States, wrestle for AEW, make it just be a huge star in AEW. And, Braun Strowman has got to learn quickly because he was clearly, and I don't know, I guess rightfully so, because he was really taken in open arms in the WWE, but he was a WWE company guy all the way. And you could see from his social media posts and things like that he believes that the WWE is the pinnacle of wrestling. Nothing even comes close to touching it. Every other organization is bush league compared to this. Braun Strowman's going to have to learn quickly that this is just not the case. AEW is they're big time. They're a major organization. They're not drawing, 1.5 million, 2 million, or in excess of 2 million viewers a week. But give it time. They're still a very young fledgling company, but they are definitely a major player, and they're going to be there in the future of pro wrestling. They're not going anywhere. Just like the WWE, and I'm going to touch on this in a second, may not be going anywhere. AEW clearly is not going anywhere, and Braun Strowman could conceivably be a part of that. Braun Strowman could wrestle in Impact, and I know I talked about Impact last episode and how I feel about their system and what they are to different kinds of wrestlers. But you know what? Maybe Impact is a landing place for Braun Strowman. If he feels that he's above the training aspect, that he doesn't need it, that he's been in the big time and he's too big to go and start back at square one and learn how to wrestle, maybe Impact is a landing spot for him. I don't know how much they can afford to pay him compared to what he was making in the WWE. But you know what? If that's his opinion, if that's his feeling, if he wants to continue to work in pro wrestling, and he's not welcome in the WWE, maybe Impact could be a landing spot. But Braun Strowman is definitely going to be a wait and see type of prospect. Of course, he's got the 90-day non-compete clause, so it's going to be a matter of 3 months before we have really any idea of where he's going. But we'll see. We'll play it by ear. Aleister Black. This one, I think, was actually a much bigger mistake on WWE's part than Braun Strowman. Aleister Black is... I'm not sure how they dropped the ball on this guy. They made such a success, and really it wasn't that they made it, the wrestler himself. But I'm going towards is the Undertaker. A similar dark character, and the WWE had what they, of course, call the Phenom in the Undertaker, and rightfully so. His career spanned decades, and he had the WrestleMania streak and etc. you could have had something similar in Aleister Black, given the right booking, given the right situation, and they just didn't do it. And Aleister Black came as really a big shock because they just put him in a really big, I don't want to say a really big angle, but for what it was, a big angle, and then they just pulled the plug on it, and now he's released. But Aleister Black is a guy who knows how to wrestle. He's very talented, and he could wind up on an AEW roster. He could easily wind up on an Impact roster. Impact would be salivating to get a guy like Aleister Black in their system. It could give them a little bit more legitimacy. New Japan, certainly. New Japan is a player for anybody. Uh, if you're a Western Caucasian wrestler, come from the United States, come from North America, you can easily make it in New Japan. There's no shortage of talent there now, but there's always room for more. So Aleister Black, his future is really wide open as far as I'm concerned. Love to see him in AEW. I think it could be a perfect match. I could see Aleister Black working a program with Darby Allin. I could see Aleister Black contending for the TNT title easily. And future possibly even a world title. But so many guys that Aleister Black could easily work with in AEW. Of course, Lana. Now, this one seems to be almost a no-brainer, but it could be a no-brainer to the point where, oh, is it really going to happen? I don't know. Uh, Lana, of course, CJ Parker, the wife of Miro, she could easily land in AEW and pick right up where she left off at Miro's side. He's playing that beast role now, and if Lana, we all know Lana can play the heel character. She did it in WWE. She did the whole angle with Bobby Lashley and the cuck thing with Miro, which I thought was just one of the stupidest things ever. But you can see the extremes of heel that Lana can play, and I like her as a managerial character. I don't think she's a great wrestler, but I could see her at Miro's side and doing some good things with that program, and most likely that's where she's going to wind up. I don't see her fitting into the women's division in Impact. Impact is touted as having one of the better women's divisions in professional wrestling, and I don't know that Lana necessarily fits into that type of thing. Just and not that she couldn't, not that she couldn't learn or grow a little bit in that aspect, but as of right now, her current talent level, I don't see that really being a good option for Impact. And you know what, they could sign her purely for the name recognition value, and a company like Impact, it would not make sense. It wouldn't necessarily move the needle or grow their fan base. It could grow their fan base. It might not. I don't know. Lana's kind of a coin toss anywhere else other than with Miro. Ruby Riot. Ruby Riot. This one I didn't understand because I thought Ruby Riot was one of the better female wrestlers in WWE. She could easily add legitimacy to any women's division in pro wrestling. So the knockouts division in Impact, she could certainly go to and really be an easy fill. AEW, they can always use bolstering of their women's division. It's gotten so much better than it was at day one. But Ruby Riot, why not? If you're looking to add legitimacy to the women's division and grow your roster a little bit on that side of the business, of course, why not? This next one is one that blows my mind, is Buddy Murphy. Uh, Buddy Murphy to me is, and I'm not saying he's as good as yet, but he kind of is a similar wrestler to a Kenny Omega. And I think he could have that type of ceiling. He is very, very, very good. And, of course, I just never did watch much NXT. And of course, he wasn't used once he got brought up to the main roster. He was barely used, so it was a total waste of time for him that he spent in WWE. If he learned something there, then good for him. If the training system helped him, then good for him. But as far as advancing your career as a wrestler, they did nothing for him. They brought him up to the main roster and they just buried him. They had him in the angle with Rey Mysterio's daughter, and that lasted not very long and got the plug pulled on it. And they had him with um, God forgive me. I'm gonna have to go back to that, but they had him in a couple major angles. Seth Rollins, sorry, I was just completely drawing a blank on Seth Rollins' name, and that's probably because the WWE has made him insignificant also as of late. But they had him in that storyline, and the matches he was in, the guy excels. He's so physically and athletically gifted. There was no reason that Buddy Murphy couldn't have been a huge, huge player in the WWE. Intercontinental title, U.S. title. Why not? And this is the problem. Buddy Murphy is a guy that I could say is so talented that he could even eventually, given the right booking, given the right circumstances, could contend for a world title. But that's not the type of guy that WWE gives the shots to. I mean, Rey Mysterio is a former world title holder only because of the worldwide popularity of Rey Mysterio. If Rey Mysterio would have started his career in WWE, he would have never gotten that far. A small ethnic wrestler. We all know Vince McMahon. There's always the rumors of him not taking to the black or Hispanic wrestlers, and there you hear that so much that sometimes rumors just you got to think that there's got to be some kind of truth to them just because of the number of stories. So that wouldn't surprise me at all with Vince, but I'm just saying that guys the size of Buddy Murphy that have that kind of talent could contend for such bigger things, but they're just never given that opportunity in the WWE. Rey Mysterio and Kofi Kingston are probably the exceptions to the rule just because of the overwhelming fan support for these guys that they were given their brief moments to shine. And Rey Mysterio, I would say more because he's always in a major storyline. It seems like when he's involved with the WWE. Kofi Kingston has had his moments. He's had that world title, but his squash to Brock Lesnar was just absolutely ridiculous. It was to me it was just unforgivable to give somebody a championship run and to put him in a squash match and absolutely destroy any historical legacy of what you accomplished is just unforgivable. And that's what Vince did to Kofi Kingston. Finally, the last one on this list is, oh, I'm sorry, I got to finish up on Buddy Murphy as far as where he could possibly wind up. Buddy Murphy, my personal wish is that AEW signs him. I'd love to see him there. He would fit right into that entire roster. There's not a single person on the roster that Buddy Murphy couldn't work a program with. He would fit in with anyone. He'd excel. Make him a heel, make him a face. It doesn't matter. He's got that kind of talent. He's fine on the microphone. He's not a Ric Flair or a Shawn Michaels or a Cody Rhodes, but he's fine on the microphone. But he excels in the ring, and he's got more than enough tools to make himself a success. So he could go anywhere. He could easily wind up on Impact, being that he was never a major player on the main roster in WWE. For the time being, Tony Khan might pass on this one just because he's stocking the roster as much as he is. Impact might sniff this guy out and sign him, and in the future that could change. He could go somewhere else, but I hopefully he winds up in AEW. I'd love to see that. And finally on the list, Santana Garrett, and I got to apologize. I don't know a lot about Santana Garrett again because I just don't follow NXT. I can't help but consider NXT a developmental brand. I don't look at it as a main brand, and it's not a main brand. If it was, you wouldn't be bringing people up to your main roster. If NXT was on the same level as Raw and SmackDown, there would never be any talk of bringing anybody up to the main roster. So I don't know a lot about Santana Garrett, but the fact that she was being considered to be brought up to the main roster from developmental, I'd say that means she's probably got enough talent where she could fit into any women's division. Impact or AEW are really the two destinations for women's wrestling. New Japan Pro Wrestling doesn't have a women's division. Ring of Honor's women's division, I think, is almost non-existent. I don't really know what the status of the NWA is right now with the pandemic and everything that's gone on. I'm not sure where they're at, what they're doing, but for a talented women's wrestler who has the ability to compete on a good roster, it's going to be Impact or it's going to be AEW if WWE is cutting ties with you. There's really no place else to go. Of course, the independents. I don't ever want to shut out the independents because a lot of wrestlers become very successful, and when they manage their personal business the right way, not only do they gain notoriety and get a lot of eyes on their character, but they make a ton of money. The Bucks built themselves that way. Cody built himself that way. It's certainly possible. So I don't ever want to rule out the independents as far as where any of these people could go. But if you're going to if you want to be on televised TV, if you want to be on network TV, Impact or AEW is going to be the place for a women's wrestler to go. Now, as far as these releases, I've got kind of a theory on this, and I don't have a great business acumen. I'm not Bill Gates, Donald Trump. I'm not that type of guy. But if you think about this, the WWE cutting a guy like Braun Strowman, cutting a guy like Aleister Black, I would imagine that Aleister Black had a fairly decent contract. But not only the big contract people, but just the volume of people that they're cutting. These cuts that they made this past week, there's talk of more coming up. So something just is smelling really funny to me, because Vince would never want to make these wrestlers available to the competition. That being probably the biggest point. Vince is known for stockpiling talent so that nobody else can get their hands on them. So something else is afoot here, and I'm going to get to that, but I want to build my case here. You've got all these talents and backstage people and announcers, you name it, being cut, contracts and salaries being cut with the excuse of budget cuts for a company who once again has surpassed its previous year of biggest profit year ever in the entire history of the company. And you're talking about a company that's been in business since the 60s. And I know that at that time it was Vince McMahon Sr. and it wasn't the WWF, it was the WWF, etc. But in essence, it's the same company. It's evolved into what it is today. And they are in now, once again, they've surpassed last year, and they are in a record-setting profit year. Budget cuts is not an excuse. If you're making more money than you ever have without cutting these people, why do you need to cut them? It doesn't make sense. There's been rumors floating around the internet that Disney was possibly interested in buying the WWE. I'm starting to think that there's more truth to a WWE sale than not. It would make sense to me, and I don't know how these contracts are structured, but if Vince McMahon dumps as many he can, if he just releases people and he's got all this less payroll, and then all of a sudden says, we're closing this deal, we're selling the WWE to Disney, to Fox, NBC, who knows, anybody, he's going to have to, the way these contracts are structured, he may not have to pay a certain amount of money to a large number of people after the sale of the company. So anything that he makes off this sale would be 100% pure profit. And he's got employees now. He's got a roster. He's got production people. He's got all sorts of people that I'm sure will have to be compensated. But if you X out this many contracts, that's much less money that you're going to have to pay out post sale of your company. And that all goes in Vince McMahon's pockets. And I got to tell you, I'm really getting that feeling inside that we're coming closer and closer to the day that the McMahon family is no longer in charge of the WWE. It's just a sinking feeling I have inside of me, and I could be 100% wrong. I'm not psychic. I don't have any sort of inside information. Pure guess on my part, but all I'm saying is if I woke up tomorrow and clicked on, wrestling news and saw that Vince McMahon was closing a deal with somebody, I would not be in the least bit surprised. So let's play this by ear, see where it goes. Anything happens, of course, I'm going to let you know about it. But this is going to be this is an interesting time, and it just figures to get more interesting day by day. Really, it's not even a year by year thing anymore. It's not even, you can't even think long term in this anymore. This anything can happen at any time. The way wrestlers are leaving the WWE and signing with other companies, and it's just insane. But we'll see. We'll see. We'll take it a day at a time, and again, if anything happens, I'm going to jump on here and I'm going to let you know about it. Got to move on to AEW now. It's been a huge last weekend and Dynamite this yesterday for AEW. Double or Nothing, big success. I'm not sure. I've heard different things. I've heard it was either the second most or most pay-per-view buys in the history of AEW. And good for them, man. They're just putting on an incredible product. So much consistency, so much quality. They deserve every accolade that they get. And all the haters and the internet trolls that live and die by the WWE and just look for excuses and reasons to bash AEW, and guys like Jim Cornette who just can't seem to get their head out of their ass and get out of the past and accept the fact that wrestling has evolved and it's not what it was 40, 50 years ago. You have to just get on board and understand that things change, and change doesn't mean worse. Not all the time. A lot of things have changed and have gotten worse, but that's just not the case all the time. But, Jim Cornette, of course, is a guy that just lives and dies by just bashing everything that AEW seems to do, and unfairly so. I always say that when you have a platform like he does, and when you start a YouTube channel like I decided to do, I always make it clear, and I made this clear from day one. And if you've watched my earliest videos, you know that I say that everything that I say when it comes to talking about a company, when it comes to talking about an individual, anything, is my opinion. I don't state anything as fact. I deliver factual news, like I talked about these releases, but when I give my opinions on things, I always say they are just that, their opinion. So AEW has got a lot of detractors, and they're gonna outlive it. They're gonna surpass it. They're gonna rise above. They're gonna overcome. They're going to. They have. They're a profitable company. They were in their first year, which is usually unheard of, and good for them. But I'm just gonna get right into Double or Nothing. I just want to talk about a few talking points that I think were important from the show. Of course, the announcement of Mark Henry signing with AEW. This is a big one. This is right up there with the Big Show, and possibly even a little bit bigger. Mark Henry had, his career probably spanned in length a very similar amount of time to the Big Show, but here's a guy that's very in with training and developing wrestlers. Apparently, he's got a really good eye as far as a scout, and I think this is a great signing for AEW, and just looking forward to see what he has to offer. They're talking right now that he's going to be an analyst on AEW's new show, so we'll see what happens. I'm sure we're going to see in-ring appearances by Mark Henry. As far as I know, he's got no long-term nagging injuries. He hasn't been used much by the WWE in several years, so we'll see what happens there. But just another great acquisition. Tony Khan's really got his finger on the pulse of what's going on and what's going to make his company better. Britt Baker finally took the women's championship at Double or Nothing, and this has been a long time coming, and she's had her struggles, and my feelings about women's wrestling, of course, I've made them known, but congratulations to Britt Baker. She's grown, she's learned, she's developed, and she finally got the women's strap. And I got to tell you what, wrestling aside, she is a great heel character. Love to see her on the microphone. Love to see her interactions with Tony Schiavone and other wrestlers on the microphone. She does that so well. She's got that part of it absolutely down pat, and she's proficient enough in the ring where she was finally it finally was a believable thing to have her take that women's title. So good for her, and we'll see where this is going to go. I'm going to talk about Dynamite after I get done with these points, but it looks like Nyla Rose is going to be one of her first challengers, and we'll see where that goes. The Inner Circle, the Stadium Stampede match at Double or Nothing. It was a really nice follow up to the first Stadium Stampede. It was different. It wasn't the same match. It was a Stadium Stampede match, but you got to look at this. The first Stadium Stampede match was the Inner Circle and the Elite, and the Elite are, you've got a bunch of high flyers there. You got the Bucks, you got Kenny Omega, you got Adam Page. All those guys are can easily go off the ropes, and Matt Hardy. I mean, he joined that group at the time for that match. So you had a bunch of guys that could do a lot of exciting high flying moves against more of a ground and pound punishing type team. So it was a different match. I can't say that one was better than the other. It really comes down to what style of wrestling you enjoy more. So this one was against the Pinnacle, of course, and you've got all these guys with the exception of Sammy Guevara. You don't have all these big flippy guys, so it was more grounded, it was more physical, it was more one-on-one, beating each other down. I just thought it was a great match, and I thought it was a great moment when they crashed through into the conference rooms at the Jacksonville Jaguar Stadium, and Urban Meyer was back there. Kudos to him. Good job to Urban Meyer for taking part in this. It's a great sport. Tony Khan said in the post Double or Nothing press conference scrum that he threw the idea at Urban Meyer and he was all for it, and he actually ad-libbed a little bit there. I'm not sure what was planned and what he added, but I thought that was a great addition and good for him, and I'd love to see more in the future with the Khan family owning the Jaguars, having a little bit of an NFL tie, and it'd be cool to see players, coaches, things like that take part in the shows and just add a little bit of extra. Makes it fun. I'm never a guy that likes to see outside athletes come in and wrestle. It's always hit or miss with that type of thing. Some guys take to it, some don't. It can be a disaster. It can be great. I don't think it's worth the risk a lot of times. And I really don't think it does anything long term for the company. You might get that instant ratings pop, but that's about it. But I just think it would be cool to have that type of what Urban Meyer did, have that type of thing with more NFL, Jaguars, of course. I don't think other teams would take part, but have that sort of Jaguar personnel take part in it and add a little extra. I think it would be cool. Jungle Boy. Oh man, Jungle Boy won the Battle Royal at Double or Nothing, and he did in great fashion. And it looks like this is the beginning of just the afterburners are going to be coming on strong as Jungle Boy just propels through this roster and takes his spot as one of the top guys in the AEW locker room. He is so talented, so young. He's accomplished so much already. The fans just love this guy, and why not? He's got it all. He's just all around just a great wrestler. So personable. He talks on the microphone, and he's not one of those crazy energetic guys that delivers these high power, passionate promos, but just comes off as just so likable and so down to earth, and he's just the guy you can't help but take to. And this is going to be big for him, and I think it's just nothing but up from here, and good for him, and just good luck to Jungle Boy, and I'd love to see a title on his waist in the not too distant future. The surprise entrant in the Casino Battle Royal was Leo Rush, and I can't say that this really does anything for me. I talk at length about how size of a wrestler is not important. It's talent, it's strength, it's ability. You see small wrestlers manhandle big wrestlers and they make it look completely believable. John Silver is a guy that I'll go to every time. He's not a big man. And when I say not a big man, I mean tall because he's absolutely jacked, but he's not this 6'5", 300-pound jack guy that just tosses people around, but he's a lot shorter and he manhandles some very big men, and it's believable, and it's believable because you see it, it's happening, it's reality. Leo Rush he's just I don't know, he's just always been such a small guy to me. It just I just I see him doing things and it doesn't look right to me. So I'm not wishing any bad on him. If Tony Khan decides to sign him, as of right now, from what I understand from the post-event press conference, he hasn't been signed, but there are plans to have him work with AEW in the future. If Tony Khan decides to sign him to a contract, that's fine. I have no problem with it. I'm not gonna bash it and sit here for an hour and say what a mistake it is, because it's Tony Khan's decision, and he's kind of clicking all the boxes right now, and I have no issues with what he decides to do. I'm just saying I'm not a personal fan of Leo Rush, and I don't wish him any bad. This wasn't a highlight for me. Now, last night was the Fallout show for Double or Nothing as far as Dynamite, and I thought this was just an incredibly great show, and some big things happen on here. Um, the opening match between the Young Bucks and Penta and Pac. If this had gone anywhere between 20 to 30 minutes, this probably could have been a match of the year contender. This was a short 10-minute match, but they squeezed so much into 10 minutes. It was unbelievable. So much action. It was hard to keep track of. And I said early on that I'm not going to do any play-by-play reviews of any shows, because I just too much of that already on the internet, and I don't think I'd be adding anything to it. I'd rather stick strictly to news. But if I was going to do that type of show, this would be a hard match to describe beginning to end, because it was so fast paced and so much going on. And I've got to say, the Young Bucks, I've seen them in the past in Bullet Club prior to AEW being a thing, and being with Kenny Omega and Bullet Club. They were heels at one point that I've seen them before. And of course, they've been heel characters earlier in their career, but at that time I wasn't aware of the Bucks. But I've seen them as heels before, like I said, in the Bullet Club, and they were fine as heels. But this type of heel character that they're doing now, this over the top, arrogant, smarmy stuff that they're doing, is just so entertaining. It is unbelievable what they're doing with this, and I'm loving every second of it. Huge support for this. I hope this goes on for a long time, because I love what they're doing. They're just so over the top with their outfits, with their style, with the things they do, with the Brandon Cutler, with the face guard, with the cold spray all the time. They're making this just unbelievably entertaining, and I just hope to see a lot more of this. Young Bucks wound of course, retaining the titles. They're not going to drop these straps apparently anytime soon. I thought there was a good chance they could have lost them to Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston at Double or Nothing, and of course they did not. But I'm just hoping to see this heel style Bucks for a long time to come, because this is entertaining. The next big thing to happen after this match was the introduction of Andrade, and this is Andrade El Idolo. And I talked about Andrade possibly coming to AEW and what impact I thought he could make, and this is going to be huge. The first thing that I took notice of of course, how can you not take notice of Vicky Guerrero shrieking? But when she introduced Andrade and he came out, the absolute first thing that I took notice of was when he was in the WWE, the big knock, you heard this all the time. Vince McMahon did not support Andrade because he couldn't speak English. And yet this guy walks in front of an AEW camera, picks up a microphone, and of course he's got a fairly heavy Latin accent, but I had no issues understanding a word he said. So what Vince McMahon's true problem, what Andrade was, is unknown to me, because I don't see this guy struggling with English at all. I'm not saying it's perfect English, but it's completely understandable. And there's no reason why this guy couldn't be given a microphone before if he handles himself this way. It's just, once again, Vince McMahon's stupidity. But was so happy to see Andrade, and I understand that Andrade is not a CM Punk. He's not, and realistically, that's probably the only name that I can think of that could make a big appearance in AEW and as they say, move the needle. Andrade's not that type of name, but I do believe that Andrade could be a future absolutely huge part of this company. I think once he gets his traction in AEW and once he shows what he's capable of, once this guy starts having matches with Kenny Omega, with Cody, if I don't know what Cody's got in his future, he's having a baby. I think things are slowing down for him, but there's so many guys. Jungle Boy, I don't know if he's gonna wrestle Miro. I don't see that heel versus heel type of action, but this guy is so supremely athletically gifted and so talented in wrestling that I don't think everybody yet fully understands how big of an impact this is going to be in this company. And I am so looking forward to this. So happy to see Andrade here. Congratulations to him. It's going to be interesting now actually to see what happens to Charlotte Flair on WWE programming, because of course, Charlotte and Andrade are a couple. They're engaged from what I understand. We all know what happened to Lana after Miro appeared on AEW television. Lana got put through a table, what was it, like 9 or 10 weeks in a row? It was insane. So we're going to see what happens to Charlotte Flair's career now that Andrade made his appearance. And Charlotte being a Flair might be a little bit more untouchable, but it's going to be interesting to see. But again, just looking forward to what Andrade's got to offer. And before I move on, I just want to talk about this, and this is important to me. These talents come from WWE and they signed to AEW, and the first thing you do is you go on the internet and you see the same comments over and over again. Oh, AEW is becoming a WWE landfill. AEW is WCW Part 2. AEW is TNA 2.0. It's the same garbage comments over and over and over again. But what these idiots don't realize, what these trolls don't realize, what they don't think about, maybe they do think about it, but they're too narrow-minded and stupid to ever talk about it. But what are you going to do if you own a company? Let's say you start a computer company and Bill Gates one day, for whatever reason, cuts one of his top senior executives from Microsoft, the guy that was integral in building Microsoft. And Bill Gates just one day says, you know what, I'm gonna cut you, I'm gonna let you go. If you're starting this company and this guy is available and you can afford to pay him, are you going to tell me you're not going to offer him a contract or a job? Pure stupidity. Pure stupidity. If a wrestler is viable, if a wrestler is talented, if a wrestler can build your brand, you would be absolutely 100% brain dead not to sign him. You would have to be a complete incoherent idiot. So to say that this is becoming a landfill is stupid. Miro is on the streak of his life right now. He is 100% what he should have been in WWE and never was. Andrade is going to 100% become what he should have been in the WWE and what he never was. You sign talent. You build your brand. It doesn't matter where they come from. You're not WCW. You're not signing retired, broken down, out of place wrestlers and putting them in situations that you shouldn't be. AEW didn't sign the Big Show to wrestle a full-time contract. They signed the Big Show for his name recognition. They signed him because he's a pretty damn good ringside commentator. They signed him to probably advise other wrestlers, young wrestlers, big wrestlers, teach them a little bit about ring psychology. They signed certain people for certain roles, and they put them in the roles that they fit in. This isn't a landfill. This is a building company that's going to be there a long time. And it's going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. And it's not going away. No matter how much you go online and go on your little social media accounts and try and bash them and try and rip them down, they're not going away. So get used to it. AEW's here. It's here to stay. And finally, from the last night's Dynamite, I want to talk about the Inner Circle had a celebration for their Stadium Stampede match. And one thing that it took notice of was Jake Hager challenged Wardlow to an MMA-style cage fight. And I'm not sure where this is going, but I am definitely interested to see what happens, because I don't know if this is going to be just a standard wrestling cage match work, if they're actually going to put up an MMA cage and have them wrestle a shoot fight. I don't know, but what makes this interesting is I saw an episode of AEW Unrestricted, their podcast, and they interviewed Wardlow, and just a phenomenal guy. If you've never seen Unrestricted, or if you haven't seen Wardlow sit down and do an actual interview, look it up on YouTube, AEW Unrestricted. Tony Schiavone and Aubrey Edwards host, and they interviewed Wardlow, and I've never seen a guy more grounded than he is, and he's got an amazing future, I think, in AEW. But one of the things that he said in his interview is that he loves working this strong style, this stiff style. He loves taking the shots. He loves being physical. He loves being able to dish it out and take it. And of course, Jake Hager, being an MMA fighter, he's not afraid to take shots. So I think you could actually put these two guys in a shoot fight and let them go at it. The only thing that scares me is you can't help but think back to Tough Enough, and maybe it doesn't make sense to put them in an actual fight like that and take the chance of a career ending or somebody getting hurt to the point where it's going to damage one of their reputations, damage their characters, damage their persona. So I want to see where this goes. The challenge was for 2 weeks from the Dynamite, for 2 weeks after last night. So we'll wait and see. I want to see this match. I want to see what happens, and just so much big happening in AEW right now. And oh my God, it's the future is incredible. It's changing so quickly. It's changing faster than you can really keep track of. But I'm going to keep track of it, and I'm going to keep bringing you all the news and let you know everything that I know, that I think, and we'll go through this journey together. So I'm going to cut that short here. I'm going to try and get another episode in shortly, because there's a lot of things going on in New Japan that I want to talk about as far as the pandemic that's affecting their programming. But I'll get that news to you as soon as possible. Until then, again, thank you so much for joining me. And as always, as long as you're here, please click that subscribe button. Please click the thumbs up. Hit the little bell for notifications. Leave respectful comments. And join me next time. I'll always be happy to have everybody come and be a part of this journey. Until then, be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. Thank you.